I want to bring in Will Coggin, Managing Director of the American Security Institute, for more on this latest increase in tensions. Hi, Will. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start off with those growing concerns about the Chinese government possibly spying on Americans via apps like TikTok. Does Beijing pose a national security risk, and is the Trump administration taking the right action to keep Americans safe?
Well, it absolutely does. The Chinese government, you have to understand, this is a communist party. They don't believe in human rights, and they are absolutely a geopolitical threat for the 21st century. Their stated goal is global dominance. And if you look at how they want to achieve that, they have a plan in the short term called Made in China 2025. And they want to establish dominance in 10 key industries globally. You talk about aerospace, robotics, engineering, and so forth. And so what's going on here is obviously the Chinese have been stealing technology for many, many years. So it's great that we are finally pushing back in some of these influence operations and spying in the United States and showing concern. But we're uncovering more and more about their soft power and influence activities to help them achieve their goals. And one big part of that is the fact that Chinese interests have bought 2,400 American companies. And this is not your local bagel shop that they're buying. They are buying major companies such as food production companies like Smithfield Foods. You have also major tech companies involved in aerospace and cars and other areas. And you also have major media companies. They have purchased AMC Theaters through Dali and Wanda. They've also purchased a major production company in the U.S. called Legendary Entertainment. And so we're seeing the Chinese put their sort of a quiet, soft power foothold in Hollywood to influence our opinions about China. So, for example, AMC Theaters is the largest movie chain in America, and the Chinese have purchased this, and that gives them a really strong control over what is shown in movies and in movie theaters, and it gives them the ability, and we have evidence of this, to influence movie scripts and what we see in movies. So there's a bigger picture here that we need to really toughen down on.
You mentioned the issue of intel theft. The Chinese consulate in Houston was forced to close over allegations that it was being used to steal U.S. intel and trade secrets. Pompeo saying that move was part of an ideological battle for the future of the free world. His warning to American businesses to not work with China did put many owners on edge. How does that impact the U.S. economy?
Well, I think there's both a threat and an opportunity here. And the threat is, in continuing to let China have so much access to our country, they are trying to gain access again for their own benefit. And they're trying to leap ahead of us in technology and displace the United States. They want the rest of the world feeding out of the Communist Party's hand. And we can't allow that to happen. So the Secretary Pompeo was absolutely right in his speech last week. We do need to look at this the same way we looked at the Soviet Union in the 21st century. This is a major threat. The opportunity, however, is that we can relocate some of our supply chains either to friendlier countries like India, which is the world's biggest democracy, or back here in the United States. We've been shipping jobs overseas for years. And just yesterday, the government announced, or Kodak announced, that it was receiving a loan from the government, almost $800 million, to produce pharmaceuticals here in the United States. That's very important. As we woke up with the coronavirus, that originated in China, and the situation was made worse by the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up and suppression of information about the coronavirus, we also found ourselves reliant on China for our antibiotics and medical supplies. There's no reason we can't bring those supply chains back in some parts of the United States. It will make ourselves more secure and more self-reliant in the long run, and it will help us deal with this threat coming from the Chinese Communist Party.
On trade, President Trump has said that he's not interested in discussing a phase 2 deal with China at this point, blaming Beijing for failing to stop COVID-19. What does the future trading relationship between the world's two largest economies look like at this point?
Well, I think people are talking about a decoupling where you have kind of a bipolar world like we had with the Soviet Union. So, back in the 21st century in the Cold War, the Soviets had their sphere of influence, and then we in the free West, led by the United States, had our own sphere of influence. I think you're going to see more and more of that develop over the years. Again, all for trade when it benefits both countries, but China's been cheating the system for years, for decades, really, and nobody's really stood up against it until recently. And so it's nice to see some pushing back against it, against the cheating, against the intellectual property theft that's been going on, and sort of a broader realization of, hey, these guys have their own interests in mind. They're using us to get ahead and eventually displace us, and their values are totally opposite of what we have in the United States. There's no free speech in China. The government has total control. It's a surveillance state. That's not who we are as a free country. And so I think, we're going to show more leadership here and say, hey, we're the free world. Here's how we want to do things. And frankly, if we have to readjust supply chains, again, that's going to be better in the long run. And there's some opportunities there.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.